What's up, ladies and gentlemen of YouTube? It's been a while, but I return to you now to talk about how one person has started a shift in the Pokemon market. And this is what I'm dubbing as the Horsea Effect. And no, this number doesn't represent my crypto portfolio because that would be in the negative, or even the stock market. This is a price increase for a 26-year-old Pokemon card. And for almost all of its existence, it was basically worth nothing. So, how did this card suddenly become a better investment than Google? And the story is pretty fascinating, and it's probably one you've heard of. And it all started with just one collector who had a very specific mission. That person is Kabuto King. This is a user on Twitter who announced that they were going to set out and buy every single first edition copy of the fossil set Kabuto card. And it wasn't a Charizard, it wasn't a holo, it was not even a rare, it was just a regular common Kabuto. A card that you could get for less than $1, 6 months ago. And it started out as this kind of quirky, harmless personal project, which was both kind of like funny and fun to follow. But it kind of escalated fairly quickly. The quest kind of kicked off back in August of 2025 on his Twitter, but by late November, the story was becoming very popular. Lots of people were following him, lots of interactions on his posts, and then overnight, it kind of just the price of that card exploded. And then just a month later, by December, we've got copycat collectors popping up everywhere. The fire had pretty much officially started to spread. The entire market for these old common cards, not just the Kabuto cards, but all old common cards, was kind of turned on its head. And this is kind of the important key takeaway here. The Kabuto spike wasn't really about the Pokemon itself, the Kabuto. It wasn't about the card, it wasn't about the Pokemon. It was about proof of concept. It showed every speculator out there that if one person's story could make a forgotten common card like Kabuto skyrocket, then you could theoretically do it with any common card. All you needed was a good enough story and enough people buying to dry up the supply. And just like that, the hunt for the next Kabuto essentially was on. People started jumping on other first edition names like Psyduck, Cubone, Meowth, you name it, they were after it. And they were all trying to recreate the same methodology that works so well with Kabuto. And one of the biggest targets turned out to be Horsea. This happened in the second wave. And over the last 4 months since November 2025, its raw price went from around $2 to about $4.21, over 100% increase. And what we're seeing is actually a classic pattern, something that's happened over and over again in financial markets, and it has a very predictable life cycle. And before we get into Horsea, I wanted to show you this. This chart here is from the economist Jean-Paul Rodrigue, and you've got 4 phases of a speculative bubble, as we like to call it. And it starts off with this stealth phase, where only the insiders really know what's happening. These are the people that tend to make the most money. And then you hit like the awareness phase where smart money starts to notice. And this is where I like to think where you and I would lie. And then becomes it enters the mania phase. That's where kind of like all the public piles in and you get this euphoria. And then finally you get this blow off phase where the bubble bursts and prices come crashing down back to reality. And people are suddenly holding a bag of obscene amounts of common cards, and divorce rates go up. And no, I'm not joking, that actually does happen. And so let's take that exact model and slap it right on top of what's happening with Horsea, because the insane run up on this common card fits the pattern perfectly. But why Horsea? Of all the cards, all the common cards, what makes it the perfect poster child for the second wave of madness? And I think it's 3 things. First off, you have a super low barrier to entry. Back in 2025, this card was less than $1. Almost anybody can buy this, right? And second is what we're calling the PSA 10 lottery. The huge price gap between a raw ungraded card and a perfectly PSA 10 graded card. And then third, I think there's pure meme value attached to it. So from just 80 cents in December 2025 to some sales now over $20 by February 2026, That's a 330% plus increase in a couple of months on just a raw ungraded card. It's got that sheer vertical climb you see when a bubble goes absolutely nuts in the mania phase, driven by nothing but momentum. So let's dig a little bit deeper into this PSA 10 lottery idea because it's so important. It's probably the one of the most important things of this video. Right now, a raw ungraded Horsea might sell for $4 to $10, let's say. But if you send that card in to get graded, and it becomes back as a perfect PSA 10, its value jumps to over $150. This creates a huge incentive for people to try buy up in bulk a ton of these cheap raw copies that they can find, hoping to hit that grading jackpot. If only a few of them are PSA 10s, they still make a good profit. And all that buying just dries up the available supply, pushing the price of the cards, even higher. So is any of this sustainable? Is this just a big game of kind of musical chairs where eventually the music is going to stop and someone, hopefully not you, is going to be left holding the bag? And that kind of gets us into the heart of the problem here. We're not seeing real organic collector demand. What we're seeing is speculative demand. People aren't buying Horsea because they love the Pokemon. They're buying it because they think someone else is going to pay even more for it than they did in the following week. It's a feedback loop, and it's fueled by hype, not by the actual card itself, its intrinsic value. And I think what I'm going to show you here really fits in. This is from an investor called Sir John Templeton, and he had a quote that kind of just nails kind of like this situation pretty perfectly. And the quote is, "Bull markets are born in despair, grow amid skepticism, mature in optimism, and die amid euphoria." And that kind of maps one-to-one onto a bubble chart. Right now with these common cards, we are deep, deep into that euphoria stage, and history has a pretty clear lesson about what comes next. So what's the actual tangible risk here? What's the thing that can make this whole thing come, crashing down? Well, the entire price is built on this idea of scarcity. That's what a lot of Pokemon prices are built on. But here's the thing. It's in the name. These are common cards. There were millions of them printed, and all it takes is for one person to find an old unopened box in their closet and flood the market with hundreds or even thousands of these minty copies, and the perceived scarcity and value of the card just vanishes, and that $20 Horsea that you paid for becomes a 20-cent Horsea literally overnight. So the whole Horsea effect, it's really a fascinating case study. It's a perfect storm of market psychology, viral hype, and the raw mechanics of a bubble. And it's a pattern that shows up again and again in all different types of markets, but it seems to crop up in the Pokemon market fairly continuously. But as always, I have no financial advice for you. Buy what you want, invest in what you want, collect what you want. And thank you for watching.